Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. Whether you're a first-time listener or you've heard many episodes of Mindfulness Manufacturing, you know by the name, we talk a lot about people and connection and really solving the problems of retention and engagement. And if you're working in manufacturing and you're driving to work right now, you know results matter. And the measurement and the results and the data is so important. Whether it's safety metrics, quality, productivity, we want to know, how are we scoring? We want to spend some money. We want to know what the return on investment is. And sometimes with people, that's harder. And mindfulness. My friend Martin Lowe is on with us today. He's going to help us a little bit dive into this. He's a founder and CEO at On Plane Consulting. He's got over 20 years of HR experience at companies like Amazon, Blue Apron, Cummins, and Lear. So welcome, Martin, and looking forward to helping us understand, how can we measure this?
Awesome, Trevor. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you and I have met, and we met through a mutual client, and you got me so curious right away because some of the work that we do is in emotional intelligence, and we like to study what are the measurable, observable behaviors by other people on us, not how emotionally intelligent do we think we are, and then we have some data to work with, and we find that manufacturing leaders really embrace that. So maybe just take you a little bit back. Let's take you a little bit back for our listeners of what was your experience at these companies, and how did you get to this path of measuring this more on how people matter most?
Sure. Yeah. So the people matter most tagline we felt like was really great for two reasons, right? Because obviously it's very intuitive when you say to somebody, people matter most, nobody's like, no, they don't, right? And then secondarily, there's a business argument around it that says, hey, if I take a look inside your business and I look at where your money's going and I look at the expenses that you could start to control or the ones that you've had more or less success in minimizing or optimizing how you're spending there, people typically are the expense that they've had the least success with, right? So, if I'm looking at manufacturing, I'm looking at inventory, or if I'm looking at scrap rates, or if I'm looking at, the equipment that I have in the plant, all of that stuff, I've done a really good job of optimizing, cash flow inside of the business, my financial commitments, all of those things. Then when you talk to them about people, they've really got typically two ways that they control those people expenses. They do it by saying, no, you can't hire more people, which kind of doesn't work, right? It does to an extent, but it constrains your ability to meet your customer needs depending on how fast you're growing or how much output you need. Or they say, no, you can't have a raise. And that kind of sort of works, but it doesn't really, because if the market's paying better, you'll lose all those people. Right? They're going to leave, and you're going to have all these turnover problems down the road. So, for us, there was really wanting to push hard into the people side of the business as a place where there wasn't good data. And without that good data, like we talked about data and investment case, if I'm going to go buy a piece of equipment inside of a manufacturing environment, I'm going to have an investment case. I'm going to know how much more efficient is it? How much lower could my cost be? What is it going to cost me to buy it and put it in? What are the interest rates? I know a lot about that before I put it in to the organization. There's a lot of times when folks will go, whether it's operations folks or HR folks, they'll go ask for money on the people side of the business. They won't have those metrics. And so it's really tough to get capital allocated to something without that. And the interesting thing for me is that you'll see CFOs and business owners, because they care about their people and because they do know those people matter most, even with less than great business cases, they'll still invest because their heart's they want it. They don't necessarily have it.
I can remember just sometimes, Martin, where it would be just, hey, well, what's in the quote? Okay, so this is the business. Yeah. So this is the manpower allocation because this is what we had in the quote, but that really has nothing to do with happening today. And every day is different. And I love how you talk about it has to be a little bit of different insight from the owner or the CEO.
That's right. No, I think that's right. So what led me down this path and what led me here was, that business case for it. But then in real life, working for great companies that were growing very quickly, that were doing a lot of really incredible things, who didn't have a good look at what good looks like inside of the people function, where they were today, what the gaps were, and then an ability to take all of that information and prioritize it down to a couple of things that mattered, and then build business cases around the investments for those. And living in an environment without that is really hard. It's really hard on our people. It's really hard on the operations.
Well, it's not hard if you've never experienced what good looks like, right? Like on how we measure that. So what was your first experience with these companies where it kind of opened up your mind and kind of said, hey, this is a different way we need to look at it?
Yeah. So when I got to Amazon, I was working in a building. By the time I'd been there for about 4 months, I had more tenure than any HR leader they'd had in that building for 3 years. And what had happened was, they hired somebody. That person was like, this thing's on fire. I'm out. And it'd sit open for 6 months, and they'd hire somebody and be like, this is not a place I want to be. I'm out. And so they had this revolving door. And because of that, they had all these people related things that they needed to do in the business that they hadn't done. And so every day there was a manager coming in that would say something like, we need to do a better job in our recruiting process. We need to do a better job in how we manage performance. We really should do a better job recognizing our people. Do we have the right shift schedule? Like and every day almost you would have a new manager coming in with something, all good asks, by the way. But if you're the person that's got to implement it, design and implementation for each one of those things could be 6 months longer. There was only one of me, so I can't do all of it. And I did as much of it as I could, as fast as I could. I did that successfully, did a number of other things there, then moved to a private equity-backed business. It was the same experience, all this stuff that hadn't been done, all these asks around getting it done. And again, feeling like everything's on fire and that we were behind. It was really tough to get things closed and all of that. Then the third time I did that, I was like, someone needs to consult around this. Like, why is there not a plan? What could this really look like if we had this done? And it was in part because I felt like I wanted to be able to do more, and in part because I didn't like chaos. And you had talked about measurement, right? And if you don't have a ruler, you can't measure it, right? So you have to have a baseline. And at the time, I wasn't aware of anybody that just had a baseline. Like, how can I just show me where I am today? And then I can use that to talk to the team that I'm working with so that we can all get the same sense for what that picture is. And that out of that, we can have a common set of priorities that we all want to go after together that we know are most important.
So what's something fundamental like we can get our hands on that the listeners, driving into work into a plant right now, what's something practical maybe that you did at one of those plants that someone could do today at one of their plants? They're probably wondering, well, what did you do, Martin?
Sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about performance management, because that was one of the first things. When I got to Amazon, one of the first things I had a leader do was come in and say, we got to fire Joe. Okay. Why do we have to fire Joe? Well, Joe's not performing very well. Okay. Well, tell me why you say that. Well,
the easy button. Yeah.
Well, Joe's rate's at 20 and everybody else is at 60. I'm like, okay, well, that sounds bad. What's the goal rate? Well, we don't have one. Okay. Why is Joe at 20? Well, I don't know. Where is everybody else? Well, there's 2 people that are at 15. Why aren't we talking about those 2 people instead? Right?
Yeah. Good questions.
Yeah. So we had a half-hour conversation like that. And what came out of that was we really needed to establish a process, a baseline for what good looked like inside of performance. And then we also needed to work with our leaders about when someone didn't hit that number, how did we find out what was going on? And in that instance, this is a perfect example. Sure, you're curious, right? And instead of going, man, this person must be terrible, we went in and looked at the process and talked with the people. And what we would find is that bad process beats good people on a very regular basis, right? And so as we started asking questions about process, what we did was we found the people who had rates at the top. We found the people who had rates at the bottom. We found the people who had rates in the middle. So we understood just where everybody was. And without setting a good or bad rate, we just said, hey, why is this person up at the top? What are they doing? Let's go watch them. Let's go ask them. Let's go see what they're doing that's different than what this person at the bottom's doing. And we went out and we watched. There was a person that was packing. She was packing at 50% faster rates than everybody else. Well, what's going on there? So we watched her at the station. And at the time, you would use a computer, print your shipping labels and all that sort of stuff. But you would input something and you would wait. Then it would give you an option. Then you would select an option. Then you would wait. Then it would give you a confirmation. You'd hit confirm. Then you would wait. And so what she would do, So as a manufacturing person, you just print cagey, right? So
Yeah.
what she was doing is she would hit the button and she'd go get the box that she knew she needed instead of waiting. And then she would hit the next button and then she would pack the item instead of waiting. And then she, right? And so she had eliminated all this lag time that other people just hadn't figured out to do, right? And so the people that were at the bottom, some of them were following the instructions to a T. Just absolutely tell me this step. I'm going to go do that step. Tell me that step. I'm going to go do that. Tell me that. Right? And so all we did was we took what she was doing. We trained everybody else to do the same thing. And all of a sudden our rates got 30% better inside of that department because we had one person that had figured it out and a whole bunch of other people that were following our instructions.
Great story when we can be a little more curious and say like, well, what's wrong with Joe? Like
that's right. That's right.
Joe's coming in every day. Like, is he trying to be a 10? Like, probably not.
Yeah.
And what I really like is there's a couple things I say or I hear, which is a lack of clear expectations. People will do what they believe is expected.
That's right.
And then the other aspect is if the expectation is to follow this order and print the button and then wait for this and print that, then many people are going to do that. And then you get the odd person that just is a little more innovative. But how do we just make it easier so that Joe can be successful? Because in manufacturing and in other industries, it's really hard to recruit.
Absolutely.
And so how do we get, I don't like to say how do we get more out of our people, but how do we best utilize, just like we would equipment, the smarts and the brains and the engagement and the conversations with Joe, right?
Yes.
Like, hey man, what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of this starts with, you had said this a minute ago. You said being curious, right? And I had a leader who said, are we curious or are we judgmental? And that is such a great delineation. If someone's listening to this on the way to work, when they have pushback from somebody, when you start to say, are you curious or are you judgmental? It's a really interesting conversation to have with somebody, because curious almost always leads you to really good things, right? Judgmental means you've made a decision and you're putting somebody on the spot. And it's really hard to get to a good place from that, right? You can't follow a thread at that point.
No. Yeah, as I say, the curiosity will lead you to what the real problem is. Because usually the problem that they're bringing you is that I need help getting rid of Joe. That's a problem on the surface. But the real problem is much deeper than that. And when we come with curiosity, we can find out what's beneath that and then stop the madness, which is what you had to do when you came in. You had to stay longer than 4 months to do it.
That's right.
But yeah, we can stop the madness when we find out what's really going on. We're having more conversations.
That's right. Well, and here's the other thing that's really interesting is I've put performance management systems in place in a lot of different places. A lot of times you're putting one in a place where there wasn't one. And in every instance, that standard deviation distribution bell curve that you're used to seeing comes into play, where you have a whole group of people. They're all making the same amount of money. They all have the same incentive set. And some people are producing at 120%. Some people are producing at 80%. You really wonder why, right? So if you think about that, either that line that you're managing, that business that you're managing, whatever it might be, why do you have a handful of people that are just A's? And you'll know if you talk to a leader, some of you your A's are, and tell me what they do. They know who those people are right away. Then the question is, well, why are those people acting that way? Why is everybody else acting? It's different. And when we did this performance management stuff, we started getting into process. We started asking people what was happening with their day and what was happening process. We improved rates across that whole building. We lost one person out of 400.
Nice.
One person. And that one person came into my office and said, Martin, I just can't do this. I know you believe in me. I know that you want me to do this, but this just isn't the right thing for me. And I'm going to quit.
Yeah.
We didn't fire them. We didn't run them out. We didn't have to.
Yeah.
They knew that we were invested in them. They knew that we cared about them. And they also knew that just wasn't something that they had the will to do. And that was okay. But everybody else improved their performance, and everybody else wanted to, because we helped them figure out the process. Right?
Yeah. So we get scared as leaders of making those expectations clear, holding people accountable. But clear is kind.
That's right.
And I would love to do a study, because we're going to do in different studies in manufacturing. Love to do a study and see, how many people are quitting because, or we have the retention issue because we're being held accountable to the standard, and how many people are leaving because they are tired of the inconsistency and the variation, and people just not having a clear standard, and which leads to favoritism, which leads to emotions, which leads to, I don't like it here and I'm going to go someplace else.
Yes.
The ultimate cost.
Well, and that clear standard gives the ability to solve, right? So think about that as a concept, right? If you don't know how you're doing when your manager comes to talk to you, you might feel like, they're playing favorites with the person that's next to you, but they're really all over you when you feel like you're working harder than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a clear standard. How could you self-manage? How could you know, hey, I'm supposed to do 10 units an hour? If I'm doing 9 and my manager comes talk to me, kind of know the conversation we're going to have, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm doing 12 and my manager comes to talk to me, I should also know what kind of conversation that we're going to have, right? And if you know what those numbers are, and if you know how you're doing, you can start to self-manage. And now that clarity gives that person some agency into what they need to do. And then you can have some conversation about, hey, Mark, you're supposed to be at 10, you're really at 9. Tell me what's going on. And I might say, well, I want to get to 10, but here's the reason why I'm having trouble getting there, right? Yeah. Now you have the opportunity to keep that person engaged, to help them along, to not have to restart the process with someone else, build a team around it. And that person can see that you care about them, and they'll work a little harder for you because you care about them.
We can't fix what we're not willing to expose. And often there's so much pressure on our leaders in manufacturing where it's kind of like, hey, I just need you to hit the number. Like, just make it happen. And I've said that before, as a leader under pressure, when I wasn't feeling valued and safe, I was feeling stressed and frustrated, yes, right? Yes. So when that starts compounding, we start burying ourselves in a deeper hole than we're already in, and we don't have to, right? It's just because, I have friends that are team members in manufacturing, and, I hear the stories, some good, some great, and then some frustrating. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah. But the interesting thing is that how many people, when they're feeling that stress, when they feel that they're buried, are going to go after a number today versus how many are going to go after the real problem that makes it hard for them, right? I mean, not always could you go after the real problem, but often you could say, man, I'm really having a hard time today. Why am I having a hard time today versus yesterday? Like, what's different between the 2 days? Can we eliminate some of that variability that's causing me those problems instead of putting that mental energy to, man, I just got to figure out how to get this done today. I got to muscle through it. I hope tomorrow's not the same.
Yeah. Do you want your energy? When you hire people, you're buying energy, you're buying resources, and you're exchanging for that, right? So do you want, and there's a whole science around this, right? It's body budgeting. Yeah. And it's like, we only have so much energy to give every day. So are we providing the structure that people can put their energy into making it better? Or are we putting them in just to survive, right? And just, buying the tool that is in the wrong place or not having clear expectations. And I saw it firsthand on a very complicated frame welding line, where we put up a screen and we let everybody know what the target was. And then it was red that we were below target. It was green, we're above target. I don't have the exact numbers, but I swear we got almost 10% more production just because everybody knew what the expectation was. We knew if we were behind or ahead. And then there was, the whole thing with the andons and calling for help if there was a problem, and that got escalated. It was just like, it's mind-boggling of how simple and not so simple some of those changes were. So sure. Take us to, so that's, you're doing your career, you're going through this. So help us understand, what are you seeing then in manufacturing in different industries? Because you're doing a lot of studies now. You're measuring companies. Mm-hmm. Give us and I know, in the 10 minutes we have left, you're not gonna be able to give us a total breakdown, but just give us like a high level of like, how are you doing that? And then what trends are you seeing?
Yeah. So we gather data on a number of different things. The biggest things that we focus on is we like to ask a lot of questions around employee perspectives inside of the business. So what would easily be called an employee engagement survey, but we actually have a framework that we use. So we think about strategy, talent, culture, and administration. Strategy is really, is your strategy clear inside the business? Does everybody understand it? Do you have a structure that supports it? Is the team able to work effectively against it? So we're thinking about that for strategy. For talent, we think about essentially, can I get the right people in the right places? Can I keep them and can I grow them? And then we think about culture. And culture is really the decisions that people make when they know what they're supposed to do and they have the tools and resources to do it. What do they do at that point? Right? Do they show up? Do they shirk? Those sort of things. So we use a survey and we talk to leaders and subject matter experts inside the business. Then we get a survey with data from all employees, and we can put the two against each other. So the leader of the business says, well, of course we have a mission, vision, values. Everyone's clear on it. Everybody knows it, right? And we bring back a survey, and the survey says that only 50% of the team knows what the mission of the company is. We can have a good conversation at that point. Say, hey, you may know where this is going. doing. But half your organization doesn't. What's the cost of that to you? What does that mean if they don't really know where you're trying to take this? Okay. And so we can use that kind of gap analysis to essentially have here's what good looks like, here's where you are, and then here are the things that could be better with a subset of the priorities they want to use.
So what I'm hearing is that the difference between what I'm used to a lot in the industry is the employee opinion survey, and there'll be a question on there: do you understand the mission, vision, and values?
Yes.
And that just, it's maybe once every year, more likely every 18 months, maybe every 3 years.
Yeah, depending
and then it's like, and I remember being on the management team, okay, make sure everybody's got the cards with the mission, vision, and values on it, and we hand it to them because we know the survey is coming up, and then we just want to get a good score on that, so we show that people know, and we truly did want them to know. Like, I wanted them to know, but it sounds like the difference that you're talking here, Martin, is that you're not just doing, the standard employee opinion survey basic questions. You're going a little bit deeper, breaking up some different buckets. And what I really like what you said is that we're going to measure what you think people know about the mission, vision, values versus what they actually are. Is that the difference of what you're doing from what everybody else is doing?
That's it. And then the other piece that really is helpful is a lot of the engagement survey providers that you have out there give you the survey. And then it's kind of like a DIY thing, right? You're sort of on your own to deal with it as is. And that deal with it is how you communicate the survey, how you get people to take it. And then the biggest thing is, what do you do with it after? Because so much of this, what we do with that survey is we ask about 120 questions, but we're really interested in a couple of things that end up being themes that come out of your data, and then getting that down to maybe 3 things. And then at that point, we're going to go back into the organization and say, hey, you said that our processes weren't standardized and that we're not good at eliminating non-value added work. Tell me what you mean by that, right? And the nice thing about that, and you may have done this, you may have done focus groups where you came in as a consultant, said, I'm doing a focus group, and no one says anything. Or all the feedback is like, let's get here because things are just great. And we want to tell you that things are great. No one hires you so that you can come in and hear about things are great, right? So
no, I haven't been in that room.
That's right. I've been there too, right? You feel really bad because you're trying to get under it and nobody will tell you anything. So we use that survey data to be able to say, hey, you may think things are fine here, but your peers said this. Right? 30% of our people said we eliminate, non-value added work and that our processes are good, which means 70% don't think that way. Tell me why they might say that. Not you. You probably like everything. Why would your peers say that?
Yeah.
Right? And then the information flows, right? And then so we take that and we start to put all the pieces together. We can group those comments based on what's really happening from a root cause. So you kind of say, hey, these are all around the same thing. And then you take that and you say, well, what's the root cause of it? Oh, it's this. All right. What would solve that root cause? So the best thing about that is instead of saddling a leadership team with a bunch of problems, they're not even sure what they are, or a bunch of things that they have to solve like a full plate, we can bring them a ready set of solutions that came from the floor about how we might be able to solve it. And they can add to it and they can change it, whatever. But when they bring that back, they've got 10 people out on the floor that are going, hey, that was my solution. Hey, we talked about this, and this is why they're doing it. And they did that because we told them this is a problem. Aren't you glad we're going to get rid of those TPS reports? Right? And so back to that, top to the shop kind of feel that
there we go.
Yes, it is. That's what that is, right?
Yeah, I love this, Martin. I love the because that's what I'm feeling when I'm listening to you. It's like, how can we provide different frameworks for manufacturing? How do we connect the top to shop? We know that when we're connected and we're talking and we understand, that we're having conversations about the Joes and we're helping them and we're curious, it's going to be great. So the listeners are driving into work. They're about done the podcast here. What advice can you kind of leave with the listeners today, or just your summary of what are you seeing? What do you want people to know when they think, hey, I heard Martin on the podcast today. He left me with this. What do you want to leave them with?
Yeah. If I were talking to someone which is driving into work and trying to figure out, they got all these people challenges, that idea of curious versus judgmental is tremendous, because judgmental means we've already fixed ourselves around a problem, versus curious. It's like we're still trying to figure it out. You can get to amazing places by just really asking good questions and being really curious about what's happening. The interesting thing for me is, for the most part, folks want to do a good job. For the most part, they care. It's not always true, but for the most part, you can find that. And if you can find a way to understand the problems that they're trying to solve by being curious, not blaming it on the person, and then making those processes easier care for them, you're going to crush it. You are going to get better productivity. You are going to have happier people that work for you. They're going to do more for you, and they're going to be happier with you. And the last bit about this that I think is really important is you'll also be in a position to pay them more if they're more productive.
Yes.
So you think of the world we live in where, we've got some manufacturing organizations where the folks that are working on the shop floor really aren't making the money to support themselves in a way that I think is what people need. Or you're just in a competitive industry. You're trying to figure out, how do I keep them or how do I get them? More money is a great way to start on any one of those fronts.
It's interesting how it all comes together, right? Like you have all this research. I have a lot of experience and working with different manufacturing plants, but it comes back down to being curious, not judgmental. Like it sounds simple and it's not. It's a habit forming, right? And we've talked about this on this podcast. So thanks so much, Martin. And you've done all this research and kind of pull this out for us. But if people want to know more about you and understand this more, how do they follow you? How do they connect with you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we've got a website. It's onplane, onplane.com. They go there. You can send us a note at hello.com, or you can email me at martin@onplane.com.
We will leave all those links in the show notes. And thanks for the work that you're doing. We need more data in manufacturing. So I look forward to learning more about OnPlane and having more information and data, because it will drive more curiosity when we have more data on how that gets us a result. So thanks so much, Martin.
Thanks for having me.
Hey folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.